Hello, viewers. Welcome back to another episode of How to Beat Beth Harmon. In the previous episode, I started a game against a Beth Harmon bot that is allegedly 2400 rated. Somehow, I got an extra pawn and a position that's probably winning. Now, they say in chess that the hardest position to win is a 1 position. So we still got some work to do if we're going to transform this into victory. She just played knight b4 here. That could cause me some problems if I just let her take my bishop. So if I allow her to play knight takes d3 and then pawn takes d3, my pawn over there is going to be vulnerable. If that pawn ends up dropping off the board, then my advantage vanishes. But we got a trick. I'm going to play rook takes e6 instead. Now after bishop c4, the rook is pinned. The rook can't move because that would be moving into check. So that means I can recover the material that I sacrificed. Now there's no hurry to take the rook on e6 because it can't run away. So instead, I'll play pawn to c3 to rescue my pawn over there. Knight c2, that is a surprise because I don't see how she's going to bring the knight back home safely. Still no hurry to take the rook. I'll just save my own rook instead. Now she's hitting my bishop, so this is the right time to take the rook. Now in the endgame, a rook on the 7th rank, remember the rows are called ranks, a rook on the 7th rank is often very powerful because it can threaten a lot of pawns. So she would very much like to play rook e2 next move. That would put the rook on the 7th rank and just be a very strong position for the piece. So I'd like to prevent that by playing king f1, but wait a moment. I think I can just trap her knight. Maybe I can just play bishop d2 here, and then rook c1, and I don't see how she can save the knight. And if I can win that knight for nothing, it's game over. Oh, I'm not winning the knight. So if I play rook c1, she has pawn takes c3, and then if I play pawn takes c3, the knight can escape to a3. But I can just play pawn takes b4 instead, and now I'm up 2 pawns. Okay, let's trade knights, and then after that, I want to play king f1 to block her from playing rook e2. Now let's trade bishops. Again, I want to stop her from invading my 7th rank. Now we bring up the king. So in the endgame, you actually want to bring your king out. In the earlier parts of the game, called the opening and the middle game, you want to have your king stay somewhere safe. But in the endgame, there are so few attackers left that your king can come out in the open and make a contribution. Now we just protect the pawns. Now I have to decide where I want to go with my king. If I play king c4, I should be safe from checks. If I go the other way with king e4, I think she can just keep checking me forever. So let's play king c4 instead. Time to activate the rook and force her to commit her king. Next step, march the pawns forward until eventually one of them gets promoted to a new queen. I want to inch forward with rook e3, so it defends the pawns from the third rank rather than defending from the second rank. I'm not really excited to play pawn to a5. That's because I wanted to use that pawn to support, playing pawn to b5 instead. I could have played king b3 instead, but then she just checks me, so I think I have to play a5. Let's keep moving forward. So now I'll force her to play king c7. I'm doing that so that she can't ever dream about playing king e6, king f5, king g4, followed by gobbling up all my pawns over there. I'll use my rook to block the checks. I want to transfer my rook to g5. That way it could defend all my pawns and also put pressure on her pawns. Here's a little trick. After a6 check, her king has to retreat. That's because king b6 runs into rook c6, checkmate. So I'm pushing her king back and just kind of gradually improving my position. Now I approach the rook until she runs out of checks. Then I'll go and start gobbling up her pawns. After that, we're just going to bring the king up and push the f-pawn until it becomes a new queen. That's annoying because if I play king g5, she'll just snap off my g3 pawn. So maybe I'll play king e5 instead. Should I come forward? Or maybe go back so she runs out of checks? Okay, now I just march the f-pawn. Now I'll use my king to support the f-pawn and maybe hide from checks on g5. Well, that's annoying. I can't play king g5 because then she'd just take my g3 pawn. Her king's also getting involved in a defense, so this is not quite so easy anymore. If I play f6 check, then my a6 pawn might drop off at some point. If I play king e5, I'll just get checked. Maybe I'll play rook h6 and try to hunt down her h5 pawn. Can't play king g5 because of rook g4 check and then rook takes g3. So I'll just hide my king from checks on h3. Maybe I'm botching this. So we were doing great, just patiently improving our position. Then she started putting up resistance and I failed to create a clear plan of action. So here, if I play rook takes h5 like I was thinking earlier, she'll play rook takes a6, and then I'm not in a good position to stop her a pawn. I could play rook h7 check and then take her a pawn right now. The trouble with that is that she'll play king f6 and king takes f5. I think that's our best bet though. So we've gone from easily winning to kind of tricky but probably still winning. Let's stop here, and in the next episode we'll see if I screw this up.